Ugh, such a boring office. Oh wow, look at that super cool AI generated office. That is sweet. So this is a follow-up to the previous tutorial where we had a look at me and my wife designing our new office using Generative Fill in Photoshop. And we did that on a still image, which has then had all of the assets created tracked onto video footage to make it part of the real life intro. And that is what we're going to be breaking down in this tutorial. Alright, so this is kind of where we left off in the last one. In Photoshop, we have all of our AI generations just on their own layers, and I'm turning off the background just to have a look at what we did. And step number one in After Effects is I'm creating a bunch of nulls for various parts of the screens that I know I want to track to be able to put my AI generated stuff back into the video footage. So I'm starting out by using the pixel tracker in After Effects. I'm tracking both the position and the rotation, and then I'm going through the entire footage and I'm going to be applying that tracking data to one of my nulls. To make the pixel tracker work a little bit better, I tried a different approach of giving the footage a black and white tint and upping the contrast to try to get more contrast into the image. And you can see here I'm trying to get a good spot to do a track. That part over there ended up working pretty well, but it's a little bit of a trial to see what works. I'm also using Mocha AE, which is a planar tracker, and that is perfect for doing things like the walls, the floor, and things that are sort of planes in perspective. So I did end up using that quite a bit as well for a few of the tracking markers, just to sort of cover as much as possible of the room with specific tracking points. Now, the entire room, obviously in real life at the moment, is very empty, very boring. And that did actually end up being a problem for doing an effect like this. If you've ever seen behind the scenes stuff for big Hollywood movies, you'll see they typically have a bunch of what's called tracking markers. And there's a reason for them having those, and that is what I found by doing this. So what I'm doing is I'm importing my PSD and I'm just dragging all the layers into my composition, and I have a marker which you can see in the timeline, and that is the image that I originally exported from After Effects that I did all of my AI generations on. So it's very important that you go to that specific point in time with your time indicator, and then you go through your layers one by one and link them to the correct tracking null that you have created. So your layers are following the relevant null to have their position make sense. So layers on the left wall will be linked to the left wall null. Layers on the right wall likewise will be linked to the right wall null. And what I ended up needing to do here, now that I had all of my AI generated things in place, was to create a few more tracking markers, because I didn't have those created from the beginning. So I put one on the desk to be able to have my supercomputer in place. I'm currently tracking the window wall area to be able to put my spaceship in place. And it's just a little bit of a back and forth on seeing where do you need the tracking markers, trying to parent the layer to one of them, seeing if it sticks and looking like it's working pretty well. And here I'm going in and retracking the wall on the right side, because the previous one that I had didn't quite work. There was a little bit of drifting and a little bit of glitching happening now that I had my actual design linked to it. Because just doing the tracking like this, it's hard to see if it's working or not, but as soon as you have a layer that is parented to the null that you're creating with that tracking data, you can very clearly see if it's looking like it's following the camera movement correctly or not. And in this whole thing, I do have my wife just pointing an iPhone at me, and there's a little bit of wobbly shake to it to make it feel natural and make it feel handheld. This could have also been shot just on a tripod, and then I could have added the camera movement completely digitally after the fact. That would be one approach of doing it, but we did it fairly quickly and just figured that we'll just go ahead and do an iPhone thing. And now the super cool thing about doing this whole thing in Photoshop, like I mentioned in the previous tutorial as well, is that you're not just getting a big pixel-based image of just your whole AI generation. You're actually getting all of this stuff as separate layers with separate masks. And that is very, very beneficial to doing something like this, because I'm going through right now and just editing the mask of all of these layers to feather the edges more and clean up things that I don't need. So we just have the main object in question, but each of these layers also has a little bit of the surrounding background, like the wall color, to make those natural contact shadows between the object that we've generated and the background that's being placed on. So it's really nice that Photoshop works this way and not just gives you an object. It does give you a little bit of the background and the blending into the background into it on the same layer as well. And then you have that masking feature, which now that I'm importing a PSD to After Effects, that means that I can jump back and forth between After Effects and Photoshop and always make those updates continually to the masking and make it feel smooth and nice and look good. And now for the spaceship and a little bit of the other stuff, I'm just adding a tiny bit of animation in here. So I'm doing a new null with just a wiggle expression. We've covered this in plenty of previous tutorials. So if you want to learn more about this whole workflow of using the wiggle expression and using sliders, do check out some of those previous tutorials. And for the pool, I'm also going to be just using a wave warp, and there's just a mask applied to this with a big feather, which turns out to be good enough for this whole thing. It's not perfect, but it is good enough just to add a little bit of movement to the water in that pool. And that's just one of those fun details that adds a little bit of extra life to something like this. When I had the idea of creating a pool, I figured, well, we probably should have a little bit of animation to it. That could be fun. And I'm just going through and doing the same thing for things like the spaceship. And this is stuff that you could spend a ton of time on, or just do little subtle things here and there and just make it feel alive enough. And now I'm just adding a little bit of a, I don't know, light cone from the spaceship that's shining down on me, and this is just using a solid with a big feather and a sort of bluish cyan color, just to get a little bit of something happening in there, which adds a little bit more life to that whole spaceship. And here we go. We got our AI generative fills in place. We've tracked them onto our video footage. We have me sitting, waving, and then blop, all of those disappear, and we reveal that it was all fake. If you like this kind of stuff, animation, illustration, tutorials, stick around, subscribe, check out other stuff. Bye!